Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another monthly Kinetics webinar. And this particular topic is on learn how to protect yourself from the dark web. So some of you might be asking what the dark web is, and it's an interesting phenomenon. You may be surprised to hear that there is a whole different global society that we potentially may not have been aware of. It has its own economy, and it actually is the driver behind the development of cryptocurrency, because this economy needs money to drive. And there you can procure a number of different services that you just can't get from regular economies, because the dark web is something that is deliberately expected to be hidden from view. And I have, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters, Leon Friend and Bill, who's our Kinetics CTO, to take you through today's webinar. Just to kick off, we'll have a quick introduction of Leon, because he's got a number of really interesting backgrounds and experience. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end and a little bit of a banter between Bill and Leon to close. From a housekeeping perspective, the session is currently being recorded and will be available in the chat afterwards. Your microphones are currently on mute. Please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions, and we'll regularly filter through those and try and bring them up as we move through the presentation. And we'll also post a copy of this presentation, the actual slides themselves, so that you can actually share with your team. Again, this is being recorded. You can share the recording with your teams as well. So let me just go on to introduce Leon. So Leon is a very recognizable individual in the IT industry, and that's mainly because of his haircut. No, it's actually to do with his beard. Fantastic beard there, Leon. Congratulations, mate. That's many years investment there, and you can see from the grey streaks as well. That's been invested over time. Well done.
Thank you.
So Leon joins us from ConnectWise. ConnectWise is a key partner for Kinetics, and it's one we've had a multi-year relationship with. Leon's experience in the industry stretches back 28 years and 14 years in cybersecurity itself. So we're really lucky to have you here, Leon. We really appreciate you taking the time. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Leon to kick into it. And as I said, you can ask questions as you go via the chat session, and we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. So enjoy. Over to you, Leon.
Cool. All right. So thanks, Matt. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everybody, for joining me today. I really do appreciate this opportunity. I would like to start really by just sort of, again, recapping a little bit of what Matt was talking about and, what is the dark web? So the reality is most of us live in what is commonly described as the surface web, or the World Wide Web, the internet, right? So this is where your news sites like One News, on your end, Google, Yahoo, CNN, Bing, all those sorts of services, Microsoft 365 all exist. Now, below that, about 96% of the web you generally don't touch or see. Right, so that's things like the deep web, where we've got academic databases, research, subscription-only services, and then when we get to the dark web, we start to get to things like torrents, and I guess the what we're talking about today is credentials, where how it's being used maliciously by malicious actors performing illegal acts, but it's also necessarily via torrents can be used, political activists, persecuted minorities, they use torrents and the dark web to communicate safely, right? So it's not necessarily all evil. And in fact, that little quote that I've got there is I actually asked ChatGPT just the other day to give me a little riddle on what the dark web is, and that's where it comes out. So he says lots of things there. The main thing is that a lot of the unseen is there, and it is actually a place where pretty much anyone can get to with a little bit of effort, and then they can access information. But what does that really mean? So there's a market, and Matt alluded to this market. So this market is really where it's been monotonized, that people can go, this is where there's an economy. So the first thing that we sort of tend to talk about is things like stolen credentials. So this is where we can go on, and this is the topic for today. I really is like, how can I protect myself when things like credentials are getting stolen all the time, right? So you can go on there, and you could literally go on and for about $8 you can buy like a New Zealand credit card, right? So we have the credentials. It can also be used. We talk about traditional 2FA, not MFA. So this is where we use how we can try and protect our accounts. If we're using traditional 2FA, such as SMS, this is where they can scrape it potentially, and then use that. And I could go on there and actually do it as a service to actually get those MFA codes.
And it's actually really timely at the moment that Microsoft has just issued a bulletin that they're actually turning off the 2FA likes of SMS messaging, and this came out in a mailer we did to all of our customer base just last week. So very timely.
Yeah, and that's really good news from a security perspective, because there are better, more secure ways of doing it that are not harder, right?
Mm.
So it's that's not a bad thing that they're doing that. We also have other things, like I could actually go on there, and I know this is a photo of the UK passports, but I honestly didn't want to bother going in and getting a New Zealand one. But you can see here that you can go online, and only for about $12, sorry, £2,000, you can actually buy a UK passport, right? You can actually get your own details put in there, your own photo, all that sort of fun stuff. So, you can see how this, from a credential point of view, can become really challenging. And in fact, you can even go on there. You've seen this happen probably more in the US than in Australia and New Zealand, because we've actually got probably a lot tighter gun laws. But you can even go on there and buy things like guns or credit cards, right? So you can see here, I can go on. I can get we all think we got the CCV on the back of the credit card, which is not encrypted into the strip or on the chip, so that we can validate that. Well, people have been scraping those, right? So there's a number of ways they can do that. I don't need to get into that today. But yeah, so I can even go on there and buy credit cards, and with CCV, so I can use them online. So where does all this data come from? Well, here's a couple more recent ones, and I actually left this one in the top right-hand corner. So if you haven't seen it and you haven't heard of it, CertNZ is a security organization focused on computer incident response sort of activities. They publish some guidelines, which I know Bill and Matt and the team do pay attention to.
Yeah.
But they also do a quarterly newsletter article that sort of covers things they've seen in the last quarter. So they do talk about some of this in here. But some of these are probably things that you've seen. So, Latitude Financial, that was a large one here in Australia. It was also a large breach that recently happened for you guys in New Zealand. So you can see here, over 1 million New Zealand driver's licenses, right? Over 34,000 passports, 90,000 people's personal bank account details, and income and expense information for loan apps were on there. There was another one for doctors, the mass breach, which is a large number. I think it was 80% of New Zealand medical professionals use these guys for insurance, and they had their personal details leaked as well. And you can see here, I included an article not specifically about a particular breach, but just to sort of give you some, background information from staff in New Zealand, and that is, it's currently about $7 for some credentials from the dark web for a credit card. But if you actually, rather than just having the bare card details, if they tie it together with personal information such as name, address, email, date of birth, the CCV, the price goes up to about $20. And guess what? We all share that information regularly. You know, where you were born, your date of birth. It's like who celebrates their birthday on Facebook? Most people, right? So yeah, we're all celebrating, but we're also sort of potentially sharing stuff.
So everyone just be aware that obviously Latitude was formerly known as GE Money, if you don't recognize the Latitude name. And there's a significant amount of people who have obviously done Harvey Norman accounts, and with 90,000 customers there, it's highly likely that there's people on this call who have been affected by this.
Yeah, it was pretty much if you've done any sort of consumer finance over the last 10, 15 years, you've probably dealt with them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, so this is all stuff. It's all happening. There's, we can be prudent. We can do what we can do to try and protect ourselves as best as possible. But the reality is this is out there, and the point of today is to say, hey, it's out there. Be aware of it. You don't need to be scared of it, because there are things we can do to sort of try and manage it. Right. So hacked passwords. So a little bit of more information on those password side of it. So this happened basically back in early last, or the end of last year, early this year. So, on LinkedIn, 2 million records were leaked as proof of scraping data from the LinkedIn website. So they estimate about 500 million LinkedIn users had their data scraped. We saw, 87 gigabytes worth of email addresses and passwords. And if you think about the plain text version of email and address and password, they really actually don't take up very much space at all. So the fact it's 87 gig tells us that there's a lot. So that was about 770 million. And then, we even had, the likes of Cisco being hacked, right? So we've seen this. There's been some recent ones around some of these ransomware attacks. The key here is to do what you can to do to best protect yourself from these. I know I picked a couple of high-profile ones, but the reality is that SMBs and small businesses like yourselves are just as targeted as everybody else. So you need to be aware. Now, we have a chance to deal with this and combat this as best we can. So we do have some things I want to talk about around email security. But what I want you to do as we're going is have a think about what you're doing and what your business is doing, so that we can actually, you can get better, right? So, for example, if you get, if there is a compromise and you get and find out about a Darkweb breach and that your credentials are there, the easiest thing is to go and actually reset your passwords as quickly as you can. Right. So let's talk about passwords. So password security. So there's a few things that are, I guess there's some best practices. There's some definite don'ts. So it's actually not too hard. From a best practices point of view, we can go through and do things like, if I have an account that I don't use, right? So who's got that old, Yahoo account or AOL account from 20 years ago, right? You don't use it, get rid of it, right? That's the easiest way to do it. If we have to set a new password, right? So here's the challenge. A lot of us have, how do I set a password that I can remember that is hard to crack? So we can have this concept is using 3 words. Now, this can be, in modern password environments, this is actually not too bad. Basically, I pick 3 words. I can do things like I can capitalize parts of it. I can use letterspeak and replace a couple, letters with numbers. I can introduce, hyphens or a special character between the words, that sort of thing. But what it does is it makes it a password that's actually a lot easier to remember, right? So I think you had an example yesterday, Bill. What was the example you had for a password that was, you're on mute. See, I threw it to him. There we are. I threw it to you unannounced, so therefore he got caught out. He thought he had it quiet.
In my defense, old age, I always pop these out because I'm looking at the whole thing, not at people's faces. So, I heard it was something like, choose a color, choose an item of some sort, and choose something that's topical. So blue, socks, Microsoft, and my 3 words.
As long
Just
as
like
Microsoft's not the site that you're actually logging into, that's
yes, that would actually. So we have the chat going, and if people want to ask a question, you can place it in there. And Leon, prior to this, had actually shared with me a little site that has a bit of a password questionnaire on it that you can go and do a quiz. So I will post that into the chat for those who'd like to have a look afterwards.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah. So and the point there is pick 3 words. They don't have to be complicated words. We talk about and make them unique, right? So here's and we know that about 40 to 50% of people actually use the same password everywhere or in multiple places, and that's something we need to avoid. Because if you get your data hit on the dark web and it appears, they will actually use those credentials and try every common social media site and common site around. So because they know so many people reuse those passwords. So we need to be unique. We need them complex, but complex doesn't mean hard to remember, right? And we want longer passwords, hence the 3 words, right? Because 3 words tend to give us length, right? You want to be doing some dark web monitoring.
Sorry, Leon, just got a question there from Wendy asking, are keychain services safe, iPhone, etc.?
So keychain on the iPhone's actually pretty good, but as a general rule, web browser password safes are not great. But what I'll say is a password safe is generally better than any, and we'll talk. I think that's my next point, is to use, make sure we're using, we use a password manager, right? Because password managers allow you to have uniqueness. They use as a phrase. It's a passphrase is basically a series of words, right? And then we can mix in some characters. So as long as they're not just straight words, then yeah, they're useful, right? But you can use your password managers can actually help generate those for you to make it easier for you to use. But the other benefit of using a passphrase or the 3 words is that they're easy to type, right? Because as you're going through it, they're much easier for you to type. So if you have a website or a service, you need to type the password in. 3 words makes it easier to type.
Using there's an old joke that goes around, of course, that my password has been breached, so now I need to rename my cat.
Yep. Well, and that's very true. So the other side of this is you should always look at using some sort of dark web monitoring. So this is a service that Bill and Matt and the team offer when it comes to monitoring your business accounts. So they can monitor the dark web against your email domain and look for credentials that are appearing on the dark web, right? We have a research team out there. It's not just known breach sources, those ones that are advertised and published and announced, but they will actually also find credentials that exist that they don't necessarily know where they came from. So that can be really important. So that and the benefit of that is when we find them, we can let you know, and then you can go change the passwords, right? So that way you can be proactive and get ahead of the game. Now, from a personal perspective, I would also recommend that you monitor your personal email addresses from the dark web. Now, from a personal perspective, there is a free tool. It's quite useful. It's called Have I Been Pawned? And I'm sure Bill can share the link for that. It's great for personal ones because you have to put individual email address in there, and then you have to accept the terms and conditions via that email. So it works great for personal stuff, doesn't work for whole domains, right? So yeah, really useful for personal, not so great for business, but we have services that go there. And we also alluded to this one earlier, is use MFA. So not just 2FA, so not just say SMS, but use an actual MFA platform of some sort. Microsoft, if you're using Microsoft Office, the Microsoft Authenticator has an app that prompts you for a code that you type in. That's great. If you're in an environment where you don't have access or can't use your phone, then there's other options potentially like the 502 standard YubiKey. Yes, you might have seen things like security keys talked about recently. And
yeah, we're actually going to do a post to everyone on the fact that we've got some UB keys available that authenticated by biometrics like your thumbprint or by just a password. So yeah, those are available to our customers as well.
Awesome. Yep, no, I use YubiKeys. They're a really great tool. There's also an NFC version that allows you to use it with your iPhones and in your Android phones, so that you don't have to plug a physical key in, that sort of thing. Now, we talked about a few do's, a couple of really important don'ts. Don't use personal information. Don't use your name or your mum's name or your cat's name as part of your password. Right. Don't use, this is a really common one. This is a bit old school, but this is actually a real thing. This is called leet speak, right? So basically, as you can see here, we've replaced the E's with 3's, we've replaced the S with a $sign, and we've replaced the A with an @ sign, right? That's a really common tool. It's well defined when it comes to how it works. It's been around since well before computer passwords existed, I believe, but it's really quite a useful tool. But on the other side, it's well known, it's well published, it's easy to hack, right? So it's one of the first generation things that people use, that the hackers use. Don't share your passwords, with family or co-workers. Your password is your password. If someone needs access to it, make sure that they get the right access using their the right things, processes, permissions, those sorts of things. Don't give them your password, right? Don't use the same password on multiple platforms. We talked about this. Every platform should be unique, so that if one platform does get compromised, that password is only going to work on that one platform, not on every platform. And then don't write it on a password note, post-it note, or a sticky note, as people call it. It's still something that we do see. I don't know how often I walk around various offices when I go out and do customer meetings and stuff, and I see this, right? Do not use post-it notes or even notebooks. Don't write it on a bit of paper and have it in your top drawer. Okay.
I still see people that will join a company somewhere, and they sit down and they log in for the first time, and hopefully they're always told, now we need you to change your password, and they do, and they will write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And that first couple of days they keep a piece of paper close to them, and that's where using the three-word combinations really help. I think for those passwords you have to remember all the time.
Or instead of writing it in a notebook or on a sticky note or a post-it note, have a password manager on your phone and store it in the password manager.
We'll come to that.
Yeah, because there are different types of password managers, and not all of them cost money. So there's ways of doing things that don't necessarily at a personal level cost you a lot of money. So it's not hard. Yeah. Now, is my password secure? And I'm going to say, hopefully, no one on this call recognize any of these passwords as one they use, but we still see password 123, the name of your favorite sport team as passwords, right? So this is the top 50. So if you've got any of these ones, please go change your password, right? Now, we've been talking about this for a long time. This password challenge has been a security challenge for many years. This list gets published every year. Unfortunately, it doesn't tend to change. It pretty much has been a static list for the last 10 years. Now, some sort of interesting ones. We joked about the sticky notes or the post-it notes. Well, so Keeper, they have a password manager. They did a survey, and basically they found 57% of users actually tend to still use post-it notes to store passwords. Right? I think as Bill said, I start a new job, I write it down on a post-it note, I stick it on my monitor. Well, guess what? That means anybody walking past can do it. Passwords saved on employee phones, about 55%. Interesting enough, this is not on a password manager on the phone. This is just like in a text file on the phone, right? And when we talk about it, 31% use their child's name or their birthday. 37% use their employee's name. Awesome. The scary number here is 44% use passwords across personal and work accounts, right? Which is a real challenge, because that way, if you get compromised on a personal account, you're also compromised on the business account, or vice versa, right? So we need to be aware of that, and honestly, we just need to stop reusing passwords.
That's really where password managers come in, because why do people reuse passwords? Because they're hard to remember. And with a password manager, you can have really complex passwords because you don't need to remember it. You don't need to type it in. The password manager can help you copy and paste or insert it for you. You don't even need to know what the passwords are. You do need to remember how to get into your password manager.
It means you just need one really good password that you remember.
Yep.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. This is why we talk a little bit about the use 3 words and do that mix of characters into it. So you can see here, going from the top right to the bottom left, as we increase in complexity, the amount of time it takes to save a password. So most common passwords, if they're only 5 or 6 characters, we're talking effectively instantaneous decryption when it comes to cracking a password. Right. But you can
just
see here
a 4-minute call, Leon.
Yep. No, I think I've got one more slide, so we're good. So here, if I use the 3 words, and I assume that, hey, my 3 words are probably on average 4 digits, so that gets me up to 12, right? 4, 8, 12, and then if I mix in some uppercase and lowercase, all of a sudden I'm talking about, it's going to take someone using current hardware 300 years to crack my password, right? So you can see how it's not hard to make it harder for them to crack. And the reason you want this time is that as soon as you find it, this gives you breathing space to actually once you find out about it, to go and change your password, which makes the old password useless. So I want you to have a think about it. So not much to talk. I've already talked around some of these stats, but 40-something% of passwords can be guessed within 3 seconds. Less than 33% of businesses, though less than a third of businesses, are actually using MFA. 76% of people are reusing passwords across multiple accounts. So the call to action is don't fall into these stats, right? It's not hard. There are some simple techniques you can use to actually, improve your capabilities of protecting yourself, but also to, make sure that if something happens, you find out about it quickly so that you can avoid, becoming a further statistic when it comes to breaches. So Leon, on build time, I think we've actually probably already incorporated a lot of this into the general discussion, Bill, but was there anything you wanted to, I'm conscious of time, Matt, so don't stress.
Yeah. Don't worry.
And if people were still on, don't end the session yet, Matt.
No.
So
I promise.
Look, if I was to sum that up, first of all, so many hacks we hear about, and we hear about a lot of really sophisticated stuff that takes place once the incident is underway. But an incredibly high percentage of them start with they got somebody's credentials, somebody's passwords. Just can't stress that enough. So the things you need to do, one, as a company, have a good password policy and make sure people are aware of it. But 2, give people the tools to manage their passwords. If, as business owners, managers, we're not saying to our employees, here's a tool and I expect you to use it, then they are going to reuse passwords. They are going to save them on pieces of paper. They are going to put them in Excel spreadsheets. Recent major hack that took place, and literally it was because the hackers got into somebody else's device, a third party's device, and found a password saved on there that gave them access off to a large corporation. So get people a password manager. Then you want that protection that actually if something does get out there, you've got to have MFA turned on. Now, it was really timely you mentioning this, Leon, because as Matt was saying, Microsoft is removing SMS text messages as a way to authenticate. Most people, of course, are carrying around the Microsoft Authenticator or the Google Authenticator, so we're using those on our phones. But I know some of you will have staff, or even like perhaps in our case here, a device that can't or won't use a phone. So there will be staff members say, I'm not going to have that on my personal phone. These YubiKeys that we're talking about, these are devices that are going to help deal with some of those logins. It's not every platform is going to support it, but they certainly work with Microsoft. Leon's got, I know he's got his little key, and like he says, it's near field activated, so he can actually hold it next to his phone and press the button, and it will do the authentication to get him on his phone.
Yeah. And what's really important
Guys,
there is
just a quick question. Sorry to interrupt. From Phil, which password manager do we recommend?
Every one of them is better than none.
Absolutely. Anything's better than nothing.
And they're all better than saving them into your web browser. That is not a password manager. That is the place where they are stored until the guy hacks you. So
So my comment there will be is look for a well-supported, well-known brand. There's a lot out there. So, if I think, a common one, Bitwarden, for example, is actually an open source platform. At the entry level, it's free, right? They have a paid account which allows you to sync between different sources and things. So that's great. What I will say is, if you are storing your MFA codes, I would recommend you don't store them in your password manager, that you use a separate tool, say, such as Authy, to do that. Right, because if something happens and someone does get in your password manager, you don't want them to also have access to your one-time codes or your MFA codes.
For my wife at home, there's a free version of LastPass, and so that's I recommend that. If you look them up, you'll find that they had a breach recently. Most people have. It's how
they respond that matters.
Yeah, we have a password manager that we supply. And we've chosen that because it meets a business situation and how you can manage shared passwords, because every company has those accounts, typically often maybe in your admin section, where you've got 3 people who have to use some online resource, but you only get one login. So that allows you to manage that. And it means you can have somebody on a rotation log into these things and just change that password and update that password manager.
Yeah.
And nobody even has to know it's changed.
And
good advice.
So some platforms like 1Password also have family accounts. So from a personal perspective, you can do something similar with your family members, and to access things like their a shared streaming TV service or something without actually having to write the password down.
So password manager, make sure MFA is on everywhere. And the problem we have as IT guys is that we can manage MFA on some things for you. So we can enforce rules on Microsoft, but there's 1,000 applications out there, right, that you don't have those on. And in fact, may not even know people are using. So you've got to drum the message into people. And then you've got the awareness. Training is so important. Training that regular conversation about security, making people realize this is real. It does take place. This is happening. It's probably happening today. We've had examples here of somebody, getting an email into their personal email account that claims to be from our CEO. Requesting that some money be transferred. So somebody's gone, I know where this person works. I know their personal email address. I know the role they have. I'm going to try this and see if they fall for it. So it really does take place. And then the final part of that awareness is we do have the dark web monitoring, which looks out for leaked passwords on the dark web. And that's a really useful tool, because also with the latest version that we have shows masked passwords. That can give a bit of a clue if somebody is reusing passwords as well, which is very helpful.
Yeah,
That's really,
it also
really
can
insightful.
flag when, so for example, I do those regularly with and partner customers like yourselves, and yeah, I so often I see things like words with friends pop up as, you know, compromise against a work email address, and you know, with Zynga and that sort of stuff. The other benefit when we talk about MFA and password managers is most password managers these days will flag whether an account supports MFA as well. So that'll allow you to go through and identify any ones that you should be going through and setting MFA up on.
So
Very
look,
useful.
team, thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up the webinar now, but I'll just close in saying thank you, Leon, for joining our session. Thank you, Bill, for your insights there as well. You can see the passion in the room around cybersecurity. If you're a Kinetics customer, you're obviously aware of the services we have around Foundation and Care for Security that cater to just these things, including an offer for a password manager. But if you're not a Kinetics customer, please reach out to one of our account managers. We're happy to cover the detail, and there is a lot of detail that flows from this around how to enable your people and make sure that they're educated and that they're aware of the things that can impact your cybersecurity footprint and your practice. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules. Really good webinar, and enjoyed everyone's input. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Leon.
More than welcome.